Hello there! It's Friday, which means it's time, once again, for the best movie podcast ever, the only movie podcast to offer objective and hyperbole-free discussion of every movie in the known universe. I am your host, the podcaster with no name, Konrad, and with me as always, his mistake is confusing the size of his paycheck with the size of his talent. It's Anthony James.
Good night, good evening, good afternoon.
Sure, you didn't say good morning. Anyone who's in the morning at the moment, get fucked.
Well, Conrad was a true fan of The Truman Show. There's not many of us out there, but morning is not mentioned in that. Good afternoon, good evening, and good night is what I normally say. But I went, because we're doing a rival this week, I went backwards.
Oh, I
Conrad.
see. You've treated the entire saying as a palindrome. And and flip reversed it. Fair enough. It's an introduction that requires pretty good knowledge of Jim Carrey movies, and I've been found out, frankly. There. I will say as well that the little jape at the beginning is not a jab at Anthony James. We'll circle back to that. It will make sense in time. Obviously, Anthony has enormous talent as well as an enormous paycheck. This week on the best movie podcast ever, Amy Adams is going to be talking to Them There Aliens, which should give
heptapods.
Probably most of you a clue as to what movie we're going to be talking about. It's in the title. It's not a secret. Brendan Fraser is back, baby. Stringer Bell is going to be playing a pink punchy echidna, and speaking of returns, Back to the Future is going to be making a glorious comeback. So I say, let's talk about some gosh darn movies. What do you think, Anthony?
Let's do it.
Movies, specifically those featuring, nay starring Brendan Fraser. I am going to be honest, once again, I've been beaten to the punch on this by the AV Club. I did come up with this joke, but when I was researching it to see what was actually going on in Brendan Fraser's life in the last couple of weeks, I was first stunned and then heartbroken to realise that they had already coined the term Renaissance. So unfortunately I've got to take my hat off to the AV Club on this one. I'm still going to mention the joke because I want some credit, but it was theirs. So Brendan Fraser, let's get this out of the way first. Where do you stand on the Big B man, Anthony?
It's one of those things these days with these people who have been around in the public eye for a long time. I'm afraid to say that I like him. I don't really know him personally, but I'll tell you what, Bedazzled is a fantastic movie.
Yep.
Obviously, he had like The Mummy, George of the Jungle. Bedazzled is the standout for me. I was a big fan of him back in the day. Monkey Bones, another one, another 3-pointer from downtown. That's a strange film, to be honest with you.
There was a Brendan Fraser movie where he played a villain and he trapped a woman in a burning cabin at the end and covered himself in red paint and stalked her. And I caught it on late night British television probably about 20 years ago. I've got no idea what movie that is, but that's my favourite Brendan Fraser movie.
A bit of a change of pace from George of the Jungle,
yes.
That's for sure.
Yeah, it's rare to see Brendan Fraser as a murderous villain, but he seemed to do a good job in that one. Obviously, The Mummy, that's great, and I know what you mean. We don't want to get into hero worship or fandom on this podcast. We should be skeptical of anyone with lots of money and power because most of the time they're bastards. But by all accounts, Brendan Fraser seems like a nice enough guy, and he was recently announced as cast in Martin Scorsese's upcoming Killers of the Flower Moon. And he's also starring in Darren Aronofsky's The Whale, which is coming out fairly soon, I think. So, for whatever reason, he has catapulted back into the limelight, and everyone was just loved to see him. And there was I don't know if you saw this, but there was a video, I think it was like a Zoom meeting or something he had with fans doing the rounds where he got all choked up because someone said, that people were glad to have him back. I don't actually think his reaction was quite as emotional as all the headlines led us to believe.
No. There's a few things my little skeptical brain's going at there. One is fine. It was a nice little moment. Yeah. Yes, he was somewhat emotional. Nowhere near as emotional as it led it to believe. But also, this is the thing that annoyed me. That woman does not speak for the internet. She said the internet's rooting for you. Can you imagine the ego on this woman to assume that she's speaking for the whole internet?
Yeah.
What she means is one random little message board that she frequents is rooting for
her and the 20 Brendan Fraser super fans that she knows personally are rooting for him. And, fair enough, they might well be, but I did get, a sense that people were really leaning into this kind of like comeback story. And I guess, for those who don't know, Brendan Fraser essentially took some time away from leading roles after the third Mummy movie. So that would have been like 2005, 2004-ish?
Something like that.
To get a lot of surgery because he'd done a lot of stunt work and needed a lot of surgeries. And then he ended up in slightly more serious tonally. He ended up actually getting sexually assaulted by the former president of the HFPA, Hollywood Foreign Press Association, Philip Burke, which left him kind of fearing that he'd been blacklisted from Hollywood. And he ended up just kind of taking a step back and focusing on... He was still working, which is actually, I think, part of what I find a little bit patronising about this. Like, he was still in TV, he still was in movies, he just wasn't really a leading man anymore because, he got older, and, maybe didn't have those Hollywood leading man looks anymore. And to be honest, who among us? I'm not criticising him for getting older. But be that as it may, he is back in a big way, and it's nice to see him. Nice to have someone who seems like a decent bloke knocking around Hollywood again. God knows we could do with more of them. Now, speaking of guys who seem good in Hollywood, but who I remain skeptical of because they seem so nice that there must be something up with them. Taika Waititi has apparently finished the story for his proposed Star Wars movie. Now, he very explicitly has said he's finished the story. It's not a script. There's no casting ideas. We're still years away from seeing this. But when asked about it, he said that it feels very him, and I'm looking forward to that, frankly. Even as someone who doesn't really care that much about most new Star Wars stuff, Taika Waititi makes stuff that I very much enjoy.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. We've talked a little bit about it before, where like it might get to the point where he's sort of a bit diluted because he's doing so much. Having said that, I'm still very excited about it. I did like his contribution to the Mandalorian series. I think he did a good job in his directing there. So I'm looking forward to it, to be honest with you. And in terms of him being like seeming too nice in real life, I'm quite a nice guy. You're quite a nice guy, Konrad. I would hate people to think that about us. I think people, anyone who I've talked to anywhere about this has sort of seen that I think we're genuine people. So I'm gonna do what I want people to assume of us. I'm going to assume of them. I assume Taika Waititi is a lovely man.
The moment that we start making serious money off this channel and we start having like hundreds of thousands of fans, stop trusting me. Don't trust me. That's my advice. That's my advice to you.
Well, it's never going to happen. So you don't ever have to stop trusting us.
Well, yeah, there you go. So I've absolutely made my bed there, but it doesn't matter anyway because either way, I'm going to make out like a bandit. I'm either going to be rich or I'm going to be loved.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to ask you a question here, Anthony, and this is perhaps going to expose both of our... Well, actually, you probably know a bit more about Star Wars than I do, but it's certainly going to expose my lack of knowledge about the wider Star Wars universe. Is there a New Zealand equivalent in Star Wars? Is it Bespin?
So you mean like a planet?
I don't know, yeah. All I want to know is how is Rhys Darby, aka Murray from Flight of Conchords, going to make it into this Taika Waititi movie?
He's just going to pop in straight in.
That's my dream. I just get Murray in there somewhere. That's all I'm asking for, Taika. I'm on my knees.
Well, this is what I'll say. If he was like some character who had a helmet on like Darth Vader or like Kylo Ren, it will not be as surprising. Like, if he took his helmet off and it was Murray, that would be less surprising than when Adam Driver took it off and he was just like this dweeby guy. Like, that was actually really surprising. So Murray would actually be not as surprising as that, to be honest.
No, that's true. And as great as Adam Driver was in those movies, one of the big kind of standout performances in those movies, I think we can all agree that Rhys Darby would have made a better Kylo Ren than Adam Driver. He would have made a better Rey Skywalker as well, to be honest. Like, just...
He would make it better anything.
Yeah, just put Rhys Darby in movies, all right? He's very funny. He should be in more things. Okay, so speaking of funny things, I don't think this character is going to be funny in the slightest. I think he's going to be earnestly edgy, which is very much what I come for, and that is the exciting news for all the Sonic heads out there that Idris Elba has been cast as Knuckles in Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Anthony,
I heard about this.
How excited are you about this one?
So I assume it just means his voice is cast.
Yes.
Like, can you imagine? He's just himself, like next to Sonic,
with just like big white gloves with spikes on them. That'd be great.
I'm not gonna lie to you, Conrad. I don't think. Now we were talking last week in our Free Guy video about like the casting of Pikachu's voice. I honestly, very rarely in my life have I got excited over a voice casting, no matter how famous the person is. I would go and watch an animated film or something like Sonic. I wouldn't care who's doing the voice of the thing. If it sounds good, it sounds good. Idris Elba's voice being in the film is not going to make me want to see a movie.
Well, all I'm going to say is that as someone who is currently rewatching The Wire, I am very much in an Idris Elba kind of mood at the moment. And as soon as I saw this, I was like, I went from, I don't really care about this movie, even as someone who kind of jokingly still loves Sonic, to I'm 100% going to see this movie in the cinema. So,
yeah, that wasn't meant to slide on Idris Elba. I'm saying like
it's out there now.
Anyone.
You've said it. You've said it.
Yeah. But I mean, you tell me anyone like is going to be the voice of this. I'm not going to care. Like if it is an off the wall casting, like Danny DeVito is going to be Pikachu, well then I'm going to care.
What if they got Robert De Niro to play Sonic the Hedgehog?
Yeah, then I'm interested because it's off the wall. Whereas it's just like Idris Elba is not someone who I think has a really wacky or crazy voice. Cool voice, but not a really wacky or crazy one.
Yeah.
So when I think of Knuckles having that voice, I'm not thinking that's gonna be weird. Whereas if it was like was that guy called Gilbert Godfrey or something? If it was that guy, then that would be funny.
Gilbert Godfrey should be in the Sonic the Hedgehog movie. He should bring his Iago energy to Sonic the Hedgehog, but with, I'm going to say, 50% more cursing, because he has a filthy mouth. Well, there you go. Ben Schwartz, you know, my phone is always like ready for your call if you want me to try and hook you up with Gilbert Godfrey. I don't actually know Gilbert Godfrey, to be honest. I don't know why he'd phone me, but I'd enjoy some kind of finder's fee for proposing that idea.
It was our idea, isn't it? So that's our intellectual property. Gilbert Godfrey as Knuckles is our intellectual property.
And Hollywood seems to function entirely on paying unnecessary middlemen. So I'm very much here for the handout. Okay, but there you go. So Sonic the Hedgehog 2, look out for that in cinemas. I think it's probably going to be next year sometime. But that'll be fun. Now, it is about that time where we have to take a shift into a more competitive spirit on this podcast. Last week, Anthony did pretty well, I think it's fair to say.
6 out of 10.
On a debut Conrad's box office bonanza, but we're now he's gonna have to shift gear again here because it's a welcome return. We've had a good week for potentials here, and I found one that I liked. It is the welcome return, of course, of Back to the Feature.
Yes, here we go.
Yeah, I thought about what it was going to be because, to be honest, I don't think you've seen this. I'll be surprised if you get it, but it's a good movie. Well, it's not a good movie. You'll see.
Doesn't count as 2 wrong in a row though, because we had the bonanza in the middle. That's all I'll say.
Well, you didn't get it wrong. You got 6 out of 10, which, you know, I consider.
No, I mean the bonanza. I got 6 out of 10. But last week the week before that, I got 0. So this one, if I got 0 again, it doesn't count as 2 in a row.
It doesn't. No, because the box office bonanza is like a Champions League match. Like that's the form is separate. Like
exactly.
we have to consider that separately. Okay, so. Welcome. If you haven't listened to this before, this is our exciting game show segment where I have selected a movie from 25 years ago today. Anthony will hear 5 clues and have 5 opportunities to guess the film. Each clue he hears will lower his score by 1, and please play along at home. Anthony, are you ready for the return of Back to the Feature?
Ready as I'll ever be.
Okay, here we go. If you get this is going to be one of those ones where if you get it, I'll give you the money myself because I just don't think you've seen it.
Must be an interesting one though, because you wanted to include it even though you think I won't get it.
Yes, yeah. It's more for the dialogue, the dialogue and the banter. Okay, clue the first. This is the 3rd adaptation of the 1886 H.G. Wells novel of the same name.
Okay. I don't know too many H.G. Wells novels names, I'm going to be honest.
Yep. I'm fairly sure you know one. This is a bit of a trap, this clue.
Yeah. Okay, so the one I'm thinking of is the one that's in Back to the Future, so that's not going to be that one.
I actually don't remember there being one reference to Back
Actually,
to the
was
Future.
it H.G. Wells? No, Jules Verne was in that one.
I don't remember what Jules Verne book is in Back to the Future either. I haven't seen Back to the Future for a while, but
Jules Verne, I can't remember the name of the book actually for Jules Verne, but it was something about like traveling through time or something. Anyway. Oh, it was at the Time Machine. Maybe just anyway. Someone in the comments will tell us, I'm sure.
I can tell you after this clue.
H.G. Wells. Actually, I'm less familiar with H.G. Wells because I just mistook H.G. Wells with Jules Verne there. Okay, so I'm not 100% sure. I'm going to have a guess because we're on Brendan Fraser. Journey to the Center of the Earth.
That is Jules Verne.
Yeah, I knew that was Jules Verne, yeah.
That is not, unfortunately, not the name of this film. I will say at this point, H.G. Wells is most famous for the movie. I'm going to say he's the most famous for the novella that I'm going to say here, but I actually don't know because I'm not an expert. But I know him for The Time Machine.
Yeah, okay. So I that's why Jules Verne and H.G. Wells were in my mind. But Jules Verne has another famous book, which was mentioned in Back to the Future, which Doc Brown really loved. Because remember, at the end of Back to the Future 3, Doc Brown's kids were called Jules and Verne.
Nice. That's one for you Back to the Future fans out there who've actually seen Back to the Future 3 more than once.
It's the cowboy one. Why wouldn't you watch it a load of times? Come on.
I don't like that movie.
Wake up, Jules.
Clue the second. Here we go. Bruce Willis was originally slated to play the lead before dropping out due to a divorce from then-wife Demi Moore, only to be replaced by Val Kilmer, who reportedly developed anger issues on set when he also began going through a divorce during filming.
Oh, God. Okay.
Doesn't really help me that much.
Yeah, that's so this is like a poison chalice, this script. Okay, did you say you like this film or not?
I don't like this version of it. I will say that much.
But you like our version, okay.
Yeah, there is a version of this film that's quite good.
And this is the third version of it. Has there been a fourth version?
No, I don't think so. If there is, I'm not aware of it.
Okay. So he did The Time Machine. I'm just wondering, does that mean he's going to do most of his stuff that he does as sci-fi, potentially? Val Kilmer. Tombstone?
It is not Tombstone. It's a good shout. Val Kilmer was in that. If he'd have played Doc Holliday in this movie, it might have been a little bit better.
Yeah, definitely earlier than 96 anyway as well. Like,
I actually don't know when Tombstone came out.
I think it was the early 90s. Yeah.
Okay, clue the third. This is widely regarded as one of the most troubled productions in Hollywood history, and it only made back 70% of its budget.
The Time Machine?
No, that's not the right answer. There have been a lot of versions of The Time Machine made, so it's a fair guess. Okay, clue the fourth. We're getting into the business end of the clues now, and hopefully these will help you guess a little bit more.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. I've actually cut this clue off, so I've got to try and remember what I was going to say at the end of this. I did write it, and now I've cut it off. Okay, clue the fourth. Marlon Brando agreed to play the titular mad scientist of this movie in large part due to the original director Richard Stanley's knowledge of Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, on which Apocalypse Now was based, and his relationship to a very famous real African explorer who I think was called like Henry Morton Stanley off the top of my head. But the original director of this movie was basically related to someone who had actually been an explorer.
Gotcha. Okay. I think my mind is in the right area now, I'm going to be honest with you. But I don't know. I still don't know. H.G. Wells. I don't know. I know the type of books he writes. I don't know all of his books though. My mind for some reason is going somewhere like underwater or something like that. It's like the story. It's kind of like the film The Abyss, maybe. I don't know exactly what it is. I don't know. Sum 41 In Too Deep.
Well, the music video for In 2D
Yeah.
is your proposed solution. Let me just check that with the computer to see if that's what we have in the database. No, it's not Sum 41's In 2D music video. Yeah, it's a good guess. It's not right. Okay, final clue. Here we go. Now we're the rubber's really meeting the road here on this one. I don't know if this is going to help you that much, but it's an interesting fact nonetheless. Final clue. Fired after only 3 days of filming, director Richard Stanley was eventually able to sneak back on set, disguised as one of the many horrific Animal Man hybrids created in a lab, actually appearing in the movie he was originally slated to direct as an extra.
Animal Man. Okay. So there's a crazy professor. There's some animal men.
Yep. Marlon Brando and Val Kilmer.
Marlon Brando and Val Kilmer. This is what I must have heard of this movie.
I'd be really surprised if you hadn't heard of at least one of these, but they are quite cult, I will say.
H.G. Wells. Did H.G. Wells create Cthulhu?
No. That was it.
Who made Cthulhu?
That was H.G. Lovecraft.
That's right. That's Lovecraftian. That's right.
Yeah.
Why is everyone... It's funny how authors always choose the same initials, isn't it?
Yeah, well, they lack originality.
Yeah. Like George R. R. Martin must have just chosen the RR because of Tolkien.
Yeah.
100%. I don't actually know it. I'm going to go for the Dwayne Johnson vehicle Rampage.
No, I think you've suggested that as a as a movie before. It is not. It will surprise those of you listening at home to learn that H.G. Wells did not, in fact, pen the original book upon which Rampage was based. This is, of course, the third adaptation of The Island of Dr. Moreau, a kind of creature feature. The best one was made in I think it was late 70s, early 80s, which is quite good fun. But a very troubled production, and I do love the fact that Richard Stanley was fired from the production after only 3 days, and then snuck back on as an extra.
Well, that is hilarious. I haven't seen this film, as you know. I'm sure. I also I wouldn't have guessed the title in a million years, but I'm definitely familiar with the imagery of it. To be honest with you.
Yeah, it's quite famous, and it's got well, certainly the one that I have actually seen, it has very, very good costumes and practical effects, which are a part of what has made it such a popular kind of cult hit. But this one was not that.
Is David Thewlis, sorry, Conrad, is David Thewlis, does he turn into a monster in this?
I can't remember who David Thewlis plays. If he's the guy who turns up at the island, I believe he does turn into a monster at some point.
Because that's just how he got cast in Harry Potter 3. I'm sure of it now.
Yeah,
100% sure of
David Thewlis, they're always just like, let me see you turn into a wolf man. That's what I need from you, David.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what it's in. Kitchen sink drama. They want him to bust out the fangs and the hair. But there you go. So I mean, it is 2 losses in a row. It is 2 zeros in a row. We're getting into... It's a slightly more barren stretch here because we're out of the summer blockbuster kind of stretch, and we're getting into ones that are maybe slightly less popular and more culty. But we'll continue to persevere, and I'm confident that you'll find your footing and you'll get some more points.
Yeah, it's also fun just to hear what the people listening to the podcast, where they got it, if they knew it, in the comments
absolutely.
below.
We've had people very, very cockily saying, "Oh, I got it on the first clue or whatever. Let's see how you handle this now." Right now, we're into that was pre-season. We're into serious stuff now. All right?
Yeah. This is the Premier League now.
Exactly. Yeah. Welcome to the big leagues. But that was, of course, back to the feature, and we are now going to move swiftly from that to our main segment, which is going to be discussing a movie that Anthony and I think it's fair to say we're both pretty big fans of this movie.
Oh, yeah.
Certainly big fans of the director. This week, we have watched 2016's Arrival. It's a movie about aliens, and maybe we're not so different from them after all. No, that isn't really what this is about at all, to be honest. It's...
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, I wanted to start off talking about this film in this way, just to set it up, right? Set the tone. This film for me, obviously it's an amazing film, we'll get into the details of it, but this film for me is all of the actual work that happened in the film Independence Day before Will Smith came along and started blowing everything up.
Yeah.
It's like all the scientists did their work, and then we don't usually see that. Usually we just see the star of the film coming in, all the scientists are like, we figured this out. And then it's like, and then Will Smith's like, where's the nearest fighter plane? I'm going to kill him,
Well, I think,
right?
it was when it was basically between them showing up and then Bill Pullman firing a nuke at them, this entire film happened. And Independence Day is kind of like the dark reflection of what would have of what could have potentially happened.
They didn't listen to the scientists.
Exactly, yeah. Well, I mean, they literally don't listen to any scientists. I guess what's his face?
They listen to David.
Yeah, David. They listen to David. But I mean, he's a hacker. He's not like a linguist. He doesn't care about learning from the aliens. So for those of you who don't know, this is essentially solving problems with words. The movie. It is about a linguist called Dr. Louise Banks, who is basically brought in by the army to decipher the intent of an extraterrestrial visit, because there are 12 ships scattered around the globe, and the various sites in various countries are all trying to figure out what's actually going on here. And I'm just going to say this now. I think, given that the premise of that is fairly compelling, I think, but it could, in different hands and with a different script, this could be a very, very dry and very boring movie, because it's literally analysing language for the most part. But I think the way that this is put together is just so engaging from start to finish. And I think the first place that we have to start here is with Amy Adams' performance. Because to me, the whole movie hinges on that. What did you make of her performance in this?
Oh, I think she did really, really well. Like, there's particular emotions, like, without getting into spoilers just yet. If you haven't watched this film, you need to watch it. Like, it is amazing. But if you want to hear us talk non-spoilery first, there's moments in this film where Amy Adams' performance has to appear a certain way, and then upon a rewatch, the same emotion, the same performance she's giving, it appears in a completely different way.
Yes.
And I think she skirts the line between two different things in a lot of scenes in this film really, really well. I think she does a great job.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely correct. I think the sort of twist, it's not even really at the end of this movie, it's sort of 2/3 through the movie, really, that you kind of figure out the twist.
The Shyamalan twist?
Yeah, the Shyamalan twist. That Slumdog Bastard. That's an Always Sunny quote, just to be clear. It's not me calling Shyamalan that. It kind of recontextualizes every kind of emotion that you've seen from her character up until like that point in the movie, basically. And I think her performance, the fact that she's able to kind of give you that duality in her performance, is exceptional. I also think, and I'm always kind of like loath to comment on an actor's appearance, particularly a female actor, because they get so much of it. But I think it's worth mentioning here that I think Amy Adams is one of those few actors or actresses who is like absolutely fearless when it comes to their appearance in movies. I think there are very few actors, male or female, who are more willing to let themselves appear less than perfect for a role than she is. And I think in this, her character comes into this movie as someone who we believe has suffered a traumatic loss in her in her family. We know that she or it's certainly presented as she had a daughter, and now she does not have a daughter, and we know that her daughter got sick. And she is very distant, she's very nervous, and the way she is shot is reflective of that. I think that she's shown to be quite pasty, quite unhealthy looking, and it's very brave of an actor to just allow that to be done to them, even if it supports the themes of the movie. And I think it's worth complimenting her for doing that, because as I say, I think there are probably a lot of actors and actresses in Hollywood who are like, no, I still want to be presented as good looking in this. I don't want to come off as anything less than that.
Well, I think that's actually an interesting point to make, because I think when you look at films which sort of are upper echelon, like this film for me is like worthy of all the praise it gets. Maybe it should have got more attention at award shows, but who gives a fuck about award shows? But what separates this from like a different like sort of space thing, which is like really high production value, like Passengers, for example. Like Passengers, we'll not get into the whole thing again, but Passengers is like a film which presents itself as like perfect looking, and the characters look perfect, and like the whole plot line is that he woke her up because she was perfect looking. And I think that even though like obviously the script is not as good as this film, but even in the physical portrayal of the characters, when you compare it to something like this, like even just seeing a frame of this film, like Amy Adams' costume choices, the makeup choices, everything like that, it just looks like they're taking it more seriously.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Like I think everything in this movie, I think, supports the themes of the tone of the piece, and I think a lot of that is down to Denis Villeneuve's kind of control of the movie that he wants to make, and I think it's kind of staggering that he was able to go from, I think Sicario was the movie he made before this, which I love. I think Sicario is one of my favorite Denis Villeneuve movies. But he went from Sicario, which was very kind of like harshly shot. Like, I mean, it was beautifully shot because it was Roger Deakins who was his cinematographer on that. But that movie looks a certain way, and this movie looks completely different to that. And it's interesting that he basically picked the director of photography, Bradford Young, for this movie because of his like kind of sensibility leaning to more towards natural light, which I think serves Amy Adams' character very well, in that it's very muted. A lot of this movie is still beautiful to look at. I think, you know, the exterior shots of the Shell spaceship, you know, it's establishing shots of landscapes are all still stunning, but it's really, I think, where this movie really excels in its visual storytelling is in the moments where you get to be close to Dr. Banks and see just the emotions kind of playing on her face, and the way that the way that she's shot, like kind of supporting the emotions she's experiencing as a character. I really can't say enough about how much this movie does for me on like a visual level.
Oh yeah, no, it's lovely. Even also the visuals of like when they actually enter the spaceship, and like the way that the gravity shifts, and the atmosphere is different, and like they have the big glass plate with the smoke behind it, and even the visual of the heptapod. They call the aliens heptapods because they have seven legs. It just, I love I know what you mean. I love the image of this. Also, it is very important, I think, in a film like this where you're trying to portray the scientists having sort of a connection with the I don't really want to say a connection with the science, but it's almost like that, like they're portraying the scientists as being more empathetic towards the aliens from the offset. It's sort of, I suppose, what you have to do, whereas like the fears of because they don't understand, like the army men, they don't understand what's going on as much as the scientists, so naturally they have less empathy for the aliens because they're just afraid of what's going to happen, whereas the scientists are like trying to figure out and try and converse with these aliens, and it really I really think Amy Adams did a great job of, like, you know, building the relationship with the aliens to the point where I did actually believe that she was forming some sort of relationship and understanding them by the end.
Yeah, I definitely think that's the case, and I think it would be remiss of us to talk about the visuals of this movie without talking about what I think are the two, well, I guess three most striking visual aspects of it, which is the alien script itself, the ship design, and the aliens. So we'll go through those one by one. So I actually did some reading up on how they went about creating the alien script, and essentially it involved they got an artist to design the script. They got two computer scientists to basically provide the basis of the analysis that Banks herself does on the language itself to make sure that the analysis of the language makes sense. They worked in consultation with 3 McGill University linguists to make sure that that the script actually made sense, and that like it was it kind of was conceivable as a script. And then the sound of the language was devised by a phonetics expert and a linguistics expert, a woman called Jessica Kuhn, who Amy Adams also prepared for her role with. So a huge amount of work went into making the script feel legitimate. And I mean, I don't know how you feel about it. it's that kind of extra, to me, it's that kind of extra effort which really lends these movies like that extra kind of sheen of quality.
Yep.
Because that's totally the kind of thing that they could have just thrown away and been like, I don't know, it's just some circles, whatever. Like, we don't need to make it a functional language, because the meat of the movie doesn't really... whether the script works or not doesn't really matter for the meat of the movie, but the fact they went that extra mile to really drill down on making a something that's believable as a script, to me it's just such a sign of quality, and it's clear that attention to detail was present in pretty much every stage of the production of this, I think.
Yeah, no, I even just the visual of them are striking. I like the way that they describe a few things. Like, there's a few things I love about the script. First thing is that they describe that it's not the same as a phonetic script. Like, no. Our script is the sounds that they make. Whereas this is not the same. So they cannot speak this in the way that it's read. So when you put out the symbol, it's the whole sentence in one go. There's no start, there's no finish to the sentence. This symbol means this sort of notion. Yeah. And I thought that was really, really cool, because it makes me that, like, there's no auditory link to the script language. It also makes sense as well. It's from a visual standpoint in the film, whenever Amy Adams' character decided to go down the writing route, because a few characters were questioning that, it makes a whole lot of sense for, like, I don't think this film would have been as good if they didn't have the script language and it was just all trying to decode what they were saying. I think that would have been harder for them to do. They needed to have the script there. Another thing is that I really, really loved the description by Amy Adams at a certain point in the film where she's describing to Forrest Whitaker's character, the army man, the fella in charge, why they need to put so much work into the question that they ask.
Yeah, like the basics, like before they get to the big question.
The basics. So she writes the big question, like, what is your purpose here? And she goes through each part of the question and says, well, we need to teach them about nouns. We need to teach them about, pronouns. We need to teach, and basically goes through the whole thing and lays out why they need to teach them what they need to teach them to understand the answer. And what I love about that moment is I listened to the writer of the script. Now I can't remember if it was the writer of script or the writer of the short story, but I'm pretty sure it's the writer of script. But someone can correct me if I'm wrong.
Eric Kaiser, I think. Who wrote the screenplay?
Wrote the screenplay. But basically, there's a moment where I think it was Denis Villeneuve who actually asked the writer to explain to him about the. Why does it need to be this way? Why do we need to teach them this? I think Denis Villeneuve wanted to know. I might be getting this story wrong, but the essence of it is okay. And basically, the writer or the linguistics expert, or whoever it was got up on a whiteboard and did that scene that Amy Adams did and explained it and said, they need to know this because of this, and explained it and lectured Denis Villeneuve. And then after finishing that little lecture that they gave them and said, this is what we need to do, Denis Villeneuve said, well, that needs to be in the movie.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the process about which that scene came about, because they did such a good job of setting up why we are doing what we're doing. And from that point on, not once does the audience question, why are we putting so much work into figuring out these symbols? Not once after that. It's such a great little way to do it.
And I think the screenplay, we'll probably come back to him because there's a lot to be said about him, but this was based off a short story written by Ted Chiang and adapted by a guy called Eric Kaiser, who wrote the screenplay. And I think one of the hallmarks of a really good screenplay, particularly when you're dealing with something that's potentially quite complicated, is it takes a complicated subject and it makes it understandable for idiots like me who don't know anything about it, but never loses that sense of expertise. So Amy Adams never feels like she's a dumbed down character. She's absolutely believable as like a linguistics expert, but I, as an idiot audience member, understand why she's doing what she's doing. So as you say, you're never asking those questions like, why do we need to explain to the aliens what a question mark is? It's so important to understanding her process and kind of getting the audience on board early with that process, I think, and it works perfectly. And I use this comparison quite a lot, and it's unfair to Sandra Bullock, but she's the one I always call out. I compare Amy Adams' character in this to someone like Sandra Bullock in Gravity, where at no point in that movie did I buy her as an astronaut, because she just doesn't partially because of the writing, partially maybe just because she wasn't quite right for the role. But I was complete. My immersion was always broken in that movie by seeing her as an astronaut because she just didn't seem right for it. Whereas in this, Amy Adams, I'm like, yep. That's a linguistics expert right there. She knows exactly what she's talking about because there are all these scenes where they establish it.
That makes 100% sense to me that you put it like that.
At no point in this movie did I fear that Amy Adams was going to project herself across the void of space with a fucking fire extinguisher. Let's put it that way.
Although we will get into the spoilers, there are certain aspects of how this film plays out which could be compared to my biggest problem with Gravity, I suppose. But they did it better in this.
Yeah, well, okay, we'll get back to that because that'll be interesting. But yeah, just to briefly return to it as well, the non-linear orthography, the idea of their script being essentially taking both hands and starting a sentence at the end and beginning at the same time and joining in the middle is such a cool concept. I'm sure it exists already, but it's the first I'd ever heard of it, and it's great to really hammer home how alien this script is to ours.
Yeah.
And of course, talking about the aliens, the next thing we need to speak about briefly, I think, is how cool the shell ship design is.
Oh yeah.
From the way it's shot externally, apparently it's based on the asteroid 15 Eunomia, which is like a very big asteroid near Mars. Is very, very striking, and you've kind of already touched on it already, but the way that Villeneuve shoots the interior and exterior of the ship with the kind of rocky texture, the production design, to be honest, I don't think this is ever going to happen because I can't see him working with Disney, but it made me wish that Denis Villeneuve would make an Alien movie at some point, because he has that ship production and method of shooting it to make it seem ominous and huge, which just it resonated with me so well.
Yeah, like the design of it was fantastic. And also because of the way this film was done, like there was very little access into the ship, we'll say. There's a particular like greeting room they were allowed to be in, and then a little bit later we get her in the smoky place too. When we get into spoilers, we'll talk about that a little bit more too. But I think personally, like, I like the mystery around it. Like, there's a lot of mystery to this ship. Like, this type of alien, the heptapod, I don't necessarily. It's an interesting one. It skirts the fine line. Sometimes you see films where you look at the aliens, you look at the ship, and you think, how the hell did they build that?
Yeah.
But and I get a little bit of that, I suppose, but not overly a huge amount. I think they skirted a nice line of mystery where it's like we don't really know much about them. We know what we know from them based on what they want us to know from them. A bit like the characters, actually.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I suppose the implication isn't necessarily that they even built it. You know, they could be part of, you know, some interstellar confederation, and they have other types of aliens that are, you know, they're engineers and they're builders. It could be like a colony of bees. Like they have different jobs. You know, they leave so much on the table, and you have mentioned it already, but I think it bears repeating. The kind of mind-bending initial shots as they enter the ship for the first time with the glow tube that they crack and throw, and the gravity changes as it goes up, and it like lands on the floor. It's very understated in how it's presented, but it works brilliantly to kind of really throw the audience off balance as well, which I loved. I think the last thing I wanted to mention and get your thoughts on just before we go into spoilers was the score by there's actually kind of two musicians who worked on this. Johan Johansson did the majority of the score, and he'd worked with Villeneuve on Sicario prior to this, and I think his kind of atmospheric droning stuff is amazing in this. They also use in the opening and the closing, because the movie is supposed to mirror the heptapod's language and kind of starts and finishes the same way, uses a pre-existing piece of music by Max Richter called On the Nature of Daylight. But I think both are amazing, to be honest. It's a great musical film.
Okay, so there's something I want to say about the score, which is spoilers. But before we go into that, I think that we've talked before about the sort of the Inception effect on blockbusters after it came out, and like the droning, the sort of style of the Hans Zimmer score for that. And I think it is present here, but it doesn't feel like mimicry. It doesn't feel like they're sort of just stealing from a different composer. It actually does feel like it fits the film very, very well. I don't think it's not a score that I would sit and listen to. It's not like one of those scores, but it's a score that's perfectly molded to the film that it's in. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's more atmospheric than kind of orchestral.
It's not the star.
No, absolutely not. But it's I think it works perfectly to support like what's actually going on the screen. And I think, to be honest, if there's something that you want to say that's kind of spoilery, I think we can probably get into spoilers now, because everything else I've got that I wanted to ask you sits very comfortably in spoiler territory. So this is your warning. If you have not yet seen Arrival, to tune this out, because we're going to talk some spoilers. So, and Anthony, what was the spoilerific thing you wanted to discuss?
Okay, with the fear of there is a fear here of appearing like quite ignorant and maybe being a bit bigoted, but I'm not trying to be, okay? Tell me if this is okay. I don't know. Am I allowed to say that I love the timbre of old Asian men's voices?
I'm trying to think. Oh, you're talking about Shang?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so you know how like the actual like the sort of deep velvety nature of some old Asian men's voices,
yes,
right? So the reason why I mention this is because the score had tones of Inception to me. And at the end, whenever, she's speaking to Shang, is it just Shang? Is it Shang?
It's General Shang. But I mean, the actor's name is Taika, and he does have a lovely voice.
Yeah, so when she's talking to the general, and he's like sort of talking to her about things that they've done in the past and saying, my private phone call, the natural sort of timbre, the sort of low, like really lovely pitch of his voice really reminded me of Saito Ken Watanabe in Inception, when he's saying "Let's be young men again," and like the score behind him and everything. It took me back to Inception, and I just love that little moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean it is a very emotive moment in and of itself, and certainly I think the score helps, and they've chosen in both cases. I think they've chosen very, very seasoned and talented actors to deliver those lines. And I think it says a lot about Taimar that the General Shang really doesn't get any screen time at all until the very end of the movie, and he's still able to deliver a compelling performance in that scene, despite us knowing basically nothing about him. So I mean,
I've just realized something before we go off. Get General Chang. He must have been named after the author of the original story, 100%.
Oh well, I mean it's Shang rather than Shang, but I mean it could be. I don't know. I don't actually know what that character's name was, or whether he was...
Oh yeah, maybe it actually is directly from the book. But yeah, anyway.
Yeah. But so okay, let's stay on him for a second, because there was an interesting little kind of tidbit of knowledge that I found out. So
I think I know this tidbit.
You probably do, yeah. So Eric Heiserer has basically like openly said what I've got a name. Louise Banks says to Shang at the end of the movie. Do you know what it was that he said to him? Have you looked this up as well?
Well, I've seen a video. There's a video where the writer of this film explained the process of that line coming about. Like it looks like you've done your research. So if you wanted to tell the story, you can tell it.
So essentially, it was never actually supposed to originally be excluded. It was supposed to be subtitled. Villeneuve himself opted not to subtitle it, I guess to preserve kind of a sense of mystery of language. But the Shang's wife's last words are what Louise Banks said to him, and it's in war there are no winners, only widows, which is, I don't think it necessarily reveals anything massively about either character, but it's interesting that it was chosen to be obfuscated in that way.
Well, yeah, like the funny, like I'm sure you're aware of this, but the funny backstory for me about that whole thing is that Denis Villeneuve, originally in the script, it had no writing. Like there was nothing there. The writer didn't include any line because it wasn't supposed to be audible. And Denis Villeneuve like rang him up and said, "Here, I want to know what she said. What did she say to him?" And then he said, "Right, okay. So how long have I got to come up with this line? Because this is like the line that saves the world." He goes, "We're filming it tomorrow." So he had to like sit around all night trying to come up with a line that they could say to do this. And then whenever he went, then he finally did it. He came up with in war there are no winners, only widows. And he wrote it down and he gave it to Denis Villeneuve. Denis Villeneuve was like, brilliant. And then when he was watching it at the premiere, there was no subtitle, and he was like, "Well, I stayed up all night, like trying to come up with the perfect line."
That's what you get when you work with auteurs. They reserve the right to be like, "Listen, you did all this work. We're not going to bother including it. It could have just been gibberish that you said there. It doesn't matter." That is interesting. But I mean, he got his props in other parts of the movie, I think. So I mean, not least, I will say it's nice to see that Eric Heisserer predicted the radicalization of parts of the American armed forces by right-wing lunatics in the media, which
that was
100% happens in this movie.
I didn't remember that. Like, I remember they did it, but I didn't remember the little scene with them watching the guy on YouTube or whatever.
Glenn Beck analog on the radio saying, "We need to give him a show of force," and the army guys being like, "Yeah, that seems like a good idea."
Did
that bit work for you? It did for me, but it was pushing the boundaries of what I was prepared to accept, because it feels like everyone would. I feel like in this situation, everyone would have the opposite problem, where everyone's so worried about doing the wrong thing that no one actually does anything.
I personally, yes, I know what you mean, and I think I actually didn't mind it. Having said that, it's a weird line to skirt, because does that happen in real life? Not necessarily. Yes, it does. Is the answer? Yes, it does. I'm sure there's people who are. Especially in the last 20 years, the Middle East comes to mind, where there's soldiers over there acting a certain way because they've been radicalized, not through their own U.S. Army system, but through other means. I'm sure that happens. Do I have any evidence for that? No. But I think that it was a brave choice, in my opinion, for Denis Villeneuve to put that in, because you're going to have... That's automatically, right, has people who sort of are defenders of people like Glenn Beck and things. It has them all of a sudden have a bone to pick with the film.
Yeah.
Interestingly, it seems that they've actually really avoided any of that criticism, although I maybe would have to go back to 2016 and read some articles. But it seems like they avoided the criticism. I think in today's climate, 2016, come on, that was actually the year that Trump got elected, so it was pretty much the same. But if this film came out now, I can just imagine all those talking heads coming out and saying, "This is not the same." It's like whenever a real shooting happens, and they literally have a manifesto from the person who does the shooting saying, "I listened to these people, and these people, and I'm doing what they told me to do." And those people come out and say, "What are you talking about?" I think that it's interesting that this film escaped any of that online.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it was. Even in 2016, it feels like a simpler time, although maybe that's rose-tinted glasses. It's worth pointing out that this movie does a little bit of give and take, because even something that's like a prestige film about the importance of communication can't resist the Hollywood trope of making Russia and China the bad guys. Which is, it's a bit of a throwaway thing. It doesn't bother me that much, but it is quite funny in a movie that's literally the entire thing is about how we should be talking to each other and not operating through fear. And knee-jerk reactions.
Yes, but I will also say, I just will also say that Russia and China removed themselves from the conversation because they got afraid of what was going to happen. And then China learned something new and then requests a meeting with the UN to discuss it, right? And then American troops are the ones who bomb their one. So in my mind, I'm like, kind of what like they were removing themselves from the situation because of it. It kind of came true.
Absolutely did. Humans can't be trusted not to pick the worst possible option, I guess. I just wanted to draw attention actually to one talking about the this kind of like underlying theme of the nature of communication and language. There's one particular piece of dialogue from Dr. Banks that I love in this movie where it's when the offer weapon line initially comes up. So as a brief reminder, about halfway through the film, Louise Banks is being pressured to ask the big question, what is your intention on Earth? And she's kind of pushing back saying, we're not quite there yet. We don't have the sort of context for the language to fully understand their response, and they don't have the context to necessarily fully understand the question. She asks the question and gets back off a weapon or off a tool, and there's lots of debate about what that actually means. And it's revealed that China has had similar conversations and got similar answers, but it's revealed that they are having a conversation with the aliens, with the heptapods, through a chess
Mojang.
game, through Mojang rather,
Mojang.
not. But she compares it to having a conversation through chess, and how that recontextualizes the entire conversation, how everything then exists in terms of opposition and victory and defeat, and it's just such a great moment to really analyze not just what we say but the context in which we say it, I'd forgotten that piece of dialogue was even in the movie, but I loved it so much.
There's some of the greatest pieces of dialogue in this film are when they go on those little sort of example, like sort of little analogies. Like I like, even though it's not true, I like the kangaroo one as well.
That's great.
Where she says to the Aborigines whenever, like the English said to the Aborigines when they showed up in Australia, like, what's that called? And they said kangaroo, but it's not actually kangaroo. It just means I don't understand.
Yeah.
And then they it's sort of the general's like, okay, I'll understand. That's great. And then they leave the room, and then she says, "Not true, of course."
Yeah, it's great. I love, but it proves the point, because even though it's not true, like, without like the general having the knowledge of that himself, it might as well be true.
Yeah, exactly.
There's loads of great writing like that in this, and I think we're gonna have to deal with the elephant in the room now, which is, of course, the big twist. We've been putting it off for far too long. It's what the people want. What the people want is the twist discussion. I personally love the kind of flashbacks to her daughter's life that it turns out haven't even happened yet, because she has begun to experience time non-linearly. Did you're more attuned to spotting where time travel, or I guess in this case kind of time perception, works and where it doesn't work? Did this work for you on a second viewing?
Yes, it did, and I think that there's nuance. There is nuance there. I will say though, if you genuinely believe that she didn't actually realize things until, it's sort of put across like when she's talking to Shang, that he gives the number, right, and then like back in the past, she's like, "Ding! Oh my god!" If you believe that she didn't know that, have that knowledge until that moment, I think it's a subtle line between the human memory and thinking that it's not consistent. I think the idea is that she was remembering the future.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like that's sort of the way it's put across to me. And because it's the idea of remembering the future, it can't really be criticized. It is more in the poetic realm. I think as well, the moment which people could maybe have an issue with is when she's talking to Shang in the future, and he says, he's talking to her and says, you rang me, and she is completely dumbfounded, doesn't know what he's talking about. That's the only part where you could say, okay, maybe that was a little lazy writing, because she would remember it at that point. Unless they are properly going for, it's not just that she can see time, it's that she experiences time all at the same time. That takes it into a whole different complex realm. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think the fact that she asked that question to me says that she doesn't experience time linearly either. So these things have already happened, but they also haven't happened at the same time, and therefore she gets that knowledge at the moment that she requires that knowledge. I actually do think there's a part of it where it is, like you said, memory. So she is it's although her entire life has already happened in the sense of how time affects her, she can't necessarily recall every single moment of that life. Just like, I can't recall everything that's ever happened to me in my past as I perceive it. I think that's kind of what they're going for with that. But I think that's the only moment really, for me at least, in the movie where they kind of get into the nitty gritty of how this time travel works, because the rest of it is purely used to inform the emotion behind the scenes where she is recalling the life of her daughter. And I think that's really compounded by the fact that the moment that she touches Abbott's tentacle through the interview room window, her first thought is of her at that point unborn daughter in this kind of like warm flash forward. It's very kind of orange. It's almost like shot inside the womb or something like that. And that is really what her entire story arc is about. So I don't get hung up too much on that particular moment where she needs the phone number.
Yeah, exactly. If they are going for like a literal that she's experiencing time, like all at the same time now, and she can learn things in the future that influence the past, fine. I think that's okay. Like, I don't think that's. I think the way they did it is still sort of somewhat consistent. But maybe if you were to make an Arrival 2 and like more than her have learned the language, that would throw in some real issues. But as long as it's just still her, and the thing is, you have to remember as well is that there's no actual like paradoxes happening really.
No.
If it's just her who has this ability, it's so far anyway. It's not like she changed her actions. Like she did continue and have the child still. Yeah. In fact, we know that Jeremy Renner got annoyed with her for that.
And that tells us that he doesn't have that ability. Like, he never learned that ability because she had to tell him what was going to happen.
Well, it might actually be as well, Konrad, that she, like the aliens passed on the ability to her in sort of a way that wasn't just her learning the language. Like, she had to experience this as well to come to be able to understand the language. It might be that she has to do that to someone else. Like, she has to somehow find a way to pass this knowledge on. And it's not just about learning the language. So, obviously she will, because, humans have to help them in 3,000 years or whatever it is. But I would be interested to know even just what like the writer would think. How would she pass that knowledge on? Because it does feel like there's an experiential element to it, not just learning the language.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I mean, she kind of had knowledge of the script prior to that connection with Abbott through the glass, and but it was that connection which awoke her to a way in which to kind of perceive and comprehend this language more thoroughly than she had done before.
Sorry, I will say one more thing. For me, from the moment that it was revealed, the twist, okay, on a rewatch, like the whole time, obviously, there's no jeopardy anymore, because in my mind, like the heptapods know what's going to happen. Yes. Like they know what's going to happen the whole time. So like they that's why they knew to push her out when the bomb was there and stuff. So once on a rewatch, it's so amazing that this is so good on a rewatch as well, because all the jeopardy's taken out of the story. Yes. You cannot watch this knowing the twist. You can't really watch it thinking that, get lost in the story and like there's no jeopardy anymore. But it's such a well-made film that actually I still go along with it.
Yeah, I know, that final 15 minutes, even though you know that there can't possibly be any jeopardy because the aliens already know everything that's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's still, it ramps up to a pretty tense conclusion despite that. Mm-hmm. And I think the one thing that really changes for me, and I wonder if you feel the same way on a rewatch, is the opening and those shots of her with her daughter. And this recontextualization of that relationship, where we know by the end of this movie, and obviously on a rewatch, we know that she knows how heartbreaking the end of that relationship will be, and yet she still chooses to pursue it because it is the experience of the relationship rather than just how it ends that is important to her. And I just love the way that the metaphor for their relationship is supported by the script that the aliens use, this idea of endings and beginnings not being as important as the whole. It's just such a brilliant way to realize your themes in kind of the central emotional heart of your story. It is astounding writing, I think.
Yeah, I also do think that my own, when my reflections personally on it as well, like she lived to like 10, like 8, 9, 10, something like that. In my mind, like, what do you get, 80 years in this world?
If you're lucky.
If you're lucky in the grand scheme of this thing, 80 years and 10 years in the grand scheme of things isn't that different. So therefore, the idea of knowing and loving your 10-year-old daughter or your 6-year-old daughter, however old they are, and then finding out that they're going to die of cancer and then thinking, I wish they never existed, is really mind-boggling to me. And I don't understand the character, Jeremy Renner's character's decision to leave and not want to spend more time with the daughter. Or you know what I mean? Like I just think that it's a strange one to me because like, surely that would make you want to cherish it more. You know?
Yeah, but I think his character has always, and we haven't really mentioned him, to be honest, but he is he's a good character, but he's kind of presented as the yin to Louise Banks Yang. Like, he never really, although he is attracted to her, and I think there's a genuine emotional connection between them, I don't think he ever really understands her work or the importance of it, and as an extension of that, I don't think he could ever grasp the concept that the journey is more important than the destination when you're talking about someone's life. He can only see the immediate future, which is that he will have to deal with the same heartbreak that Louise Banks and her daughter will have to deal with. But I absolutely agree with you. I think it's placed in this position. I don't think. In fact, I don't actually think he would. I think if we analyse his character, I don't think he would choose not to have a daughter, even though we find out by the end of the movie that he has said to Louise Banks that she made the wrong decision, presumably in meaning pursuing a relationship with Dr. Donnelly and having a child together. I don't know if he genuinely believes that, though, because I don't think any parent would on reflection, if you found out your child was ill, you would think, I wish we could go back and just not have the child.
Yeah, I know. The whole it's different if it's like a 2-year-old child and has nothing but chronic pain. Like, that's a different thing. But when you got like a 7 or 8-year-old who's experienced all this joy in life, I think it's a bit strange. I just want to say something before we end here, Konrad. Sure. The writer of this film, Eric Heiserer, is it? Yeah. He's also attached to write the American remake of Your Name.
Oh, interesting.
Which we watched last week.
That was not intentional, but that's a lovely little link.
Yeah, and interesting. Like, just doing a little bit of research about this. It says here. Now, I actually like this change. Now, people who listen to this podcast know, in terms of the Death Note remake, terrible. Like, it was all right. Like, bog standard 6 out of 10. Having said that, it would have been worse if they just completely copied the Japanese version. They changed it, which made it a 6 out of 10. If they didn't do that, it would have been a 3 out of 10. They're making changes. Apparently, in the Your Name remake, the distributors of the original Your Name, Toho, they personally requested that the remake be seen through an American point of view, which has resulted in changes of setting. For example, Tokyo is now being Chicago, and rural Japan has been changed to the Native American countryside. Oh, okay. So they're gonna bring the Native American character in it to have sort of the dichotomy between the city living and Native American countryside. Okay. I think that might be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and there's definitely analogues there between adherence to Shinto in Japan, which, as I understand it, is a not as marginalized as Native Americans are, but certainly not the most mainstream of religious religious beliefs. So that's really interesting. That was not deliberate, but I look forward to seeing what they do with that, because that makes me more confident than I would have been otherwise. But yeah, so I guess overall, I think it's pretty clear from what we said how we feel about it. But I really like this movie. Would you say the same?
I would actually, yes, I would say the same. I need to watch more of Denis Villeneuve's stuff. I do really love him as a director. I love Prisoners as well. I haven't seen some of others. I haven't seen Sicario, for example. When you said you loved that one, I thought I have to watch that now.
Yeah, Sicario is very actiony, but I just think Denis Villeneuve is such a versatile director. He can do so many different styles, and that's worth watching.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said as well for a lot of big directors these days are also the writers of their own films. Yes. It's sort of the way that Hollywood's going. Whereas I like Denis Villeneuve. I don't think he's not ever written. I think he's written some stuff, but I like the fact that he's sort of a throwback to the old sort of Steven Spielberg, where he'll direct so many more films because he just comes into a project that's already been written and sort of works with it as a director, solely as a director. I sort of like that. He's like a sort of a throwback director.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and good example of someone who can still be an auteur, still have a very firm creative vision and control over what they're delivering without necessarily needing to have a hand in creating every single part of the movie.
Yes.
Right, okay, well that's going to do it for us here, I think, which leaves us with one simple question to answer, as we always do, and that is, Anthony, what's your favourite movie?
This is going to be a bit of a hodgepodge answer, because I can't remember the name of it, but there is a documentary on Disney Plus about eating competitions, and I would ask you guys to go and watch it. I can't remember what it's called, but it won't be hard to find. There's literally only one eating documentary on there, but it's about like it's so funny. Like it's about the struggles of this young American fella to topple the great Japanese eating master in a hot dog competition.
Oh, what, Kobayashi? Is Kobayashi in it?
Yeah, I think Kobayashi, is that his name? Yeah,
that's the guy who used to be like the big hot dog eating guy.
Yeah, it's worth a shout, because like, to be honest with you, it sort of puts it across at the start where like this Japanese guy is like the best guy in the world, and this underdog American is trying to beat him. But by the time the switch happens and the American guy does beat him, which isn't a spoiler because apparently he was really famous, this American guy in America for a while, when he finally does beat him, the who you are on the side of switches, is what I'll say.
Okay.
And it's a really interesting documentary, which I think it's worth checking out.
Okay, well, I just had a look for it in Google and I couldn't find it, so God go with you if you look for that, listener. My favourite movie is Sicario. Denis Villeneuve doesn't really make bad movies, but that's a great one. Thank you to Nancy Wyatt and Jared Iscariot for the use of our theme song. You can check out other stuff from them down in the link below. And thank you to you for listening. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already. We are The Culture Cave on YouTube and the best movie podcast ever on podcasting apps. Get involved in the comments, give the show a like. It really does help. And we will see you same time, same place next week.
And cut.